Hello, my name is Ilona, and in this short video I just want to talk about reality. Because usually when people are talking about reality, they see this as this firm thing outside of ourselves. We are moving in reality and you can't really change reality. So there are rules, there are certain laws that are present in reality, and you can't change that. You can't move around it. The reality is for everyone the same thing. At least that's what I was told, that's how I was brought up. And we need to understand reality. We need to experiment with it, but also all these scientific experiments and looking at it in a scientific way, because then we can finally understand reality. And when we understand reality, of course, we can also change a few things, but still it's all within the reality realm. And I think that is not the correct perspective. At least that's not how I see things. My perspective is that reality is very flexible and you can change things in reality. And reality is, in a way, designed by how we view things. It has to do with our energies. It has to do with what we create. And I also thought something interesting that I was looking for and I finally found it. This is called the observer effect. This is in physics. The observer effect is the disturbance of an observed system by the act of observation. And I think that in itself kind of says everything. So if the observer has an effect on the experiment, then that should tell you that reality is not really like a straightforward thing. Reality is how we see things. There are certain agreements we have, like I said, for instance, with this color. Usually most people will see this as blue, and I think it will come across as blue on the camera. And most people will agree with that, that's blue, but people don't have the same, I don't know what kind of color it is for someone else. We've agreed that this is blue, but I don't know that what I see as blue will be exactly the same for someone else. And that is, of course, if someone is not colorblind, but that's usually the case with everything. Is maybe even if you reminisce about certain memories, people will have seen different things than what you've seen. And that's the interesting part of this, that really, what is reality when we all have our different points of views? There are certain things that we agree on, like the sky, and certain things we see, but it's just interesting to think about that, because a lot of people also, I see under my videos, reactions like, well, I'm being realistic, you're very naive. That's a lot of things I hear. I read that apparently because I believe that everything will be all right, that I'm not seeing the entire picture. And I usually see when someone says I'm realistic, that usually means they're quite negatively oriented, in a way that they see everything as dark energies, and I'm not being realistic. I said, what is being realistic? Because if reality is flexible, then it depends on your point of view what realistic is. So your realism and realistic things can be very different from mine. So in my point of view, I'm being realistic and you're not being realistic. You get that, in a way, that discussion. And I think it's very difficult for a lot of people, unfortunately also in this community, to see it that way. Like I said, this is my perspective. If it doesn't resonate, of course, it's perfectly fine. We all have different perspectives. But I do believe that reality is what we make of it, how we view things. You also have, of course, people with mental diseases that can, turn into a psychosis, and they see something completely different. Well, if reality was that real, that in a way shouldn't be possible, but that tells you that the mind can play tricks on you and the mind changes things. And that's the interesting part about this, that ultimately the mind decides what you see and what your reality is. That's also with different lives people have. For instance, if you were brought up with a lot of money, or if you grew up that there was always money, there was more than enough, then usually you're not going to worry about that. You're not even going to think about that, because it's always there and you will always attract money. But if you were brought up, in my case, with, struggling and not enough money, and then you will have this mindset, there is not enough money. And then usually when you grow, in your older yourself, you will still be in that mindset. And then there's usually not enough money. It's kind of like you're creating that. And a lot of people have a difficulty seeing it that way, because it's realistic that you don't have all the money or not enough money, and there are rich people and then there are poor people. They, in a way, what we presented with is what they, how do you stick to that as well? It's like they perpetuate that, I think you understand what I mean, but you keep that going. It's like it's the same system all the time. And that's interesting to think about. So if you change your mindset, your energy, then you will change your life. You will change your reality. And I think we really need to step into that. That is the Great Awakening. That's why there is so much focus on the humanity, because we are capable of creating. We're already creating on an unconscious level, but right now we're usually creating what we're being told, what we've been programmed. So that's what we're creating over and over and over again. And it is time to see this as an opportunity to move back, look at what we're doing, work with things in ourselves, heal ourselves, because then we will have a different reality. We will have a different life. And that is, of course, what they don't want us to do, because then their lives will change in a way as well. Like a certain energies want a certain agenda, a certain way of life. That's why they've been programming us for so long. And it's now time that we step out of that programming and start creating for ourselves. Like I said, we are already creating, but it's very important that we start creating consciously, and that we realize that we really are the creators of our reality. And I fully understand that people will be reacting with the most horrible situations they can think of. Well, what about this? And why would someone create this? And I can't just say why someone would create certain things, but we have to do with soul contracts. We have to do with a lot of things that happen during our souls, our experiences, but ultimately things are created for a certain reason, and we may not know. We may think of it or may look at it from our limited perspective, but on the bigger things of, the bigger spiritual things that are going on, and usually there is a certain reason, of course, behind certain things. So I just don't want to go into that, because then again, this is going to be a very long video, and I like to keep this short and to the point. So to me, reality has to do with how you are, what your point of view is. That's what you're attracting. You're attracting the certain situations in your life. You're attracting based on your convictions or your belief system. So if you change your convictions, your belief systems, if you change your energy, then you can really create what you really want. And I think that is the ultimate Great Awakening, that we understand that we understand that we are creating reality, that we are creating new ways of looking at things, changing that so we can create what we really want to do in this life. So I'd like to, it's really the thing I wanted to point out. And for people saying you have to be realistic, usually that means you have to be harder or tougher, and that has nothing to do ultimately with being realistic. If reality is flexible, then really it's all about where you are and how you see things. Like I said, for a lot of people that is very difficult to understand, to understand that that's how it works. Even in this community, you have a lot of awake people that see all the connections, but they're not very spiritual. You also have a lot of spiritual people that are not aware of what is really going on. And we need a combination of both. We need to understand what's been going on, all the manipulations, but we also need to understand that we are the creators here, and ultimately we can change this all. And that's really what we need to do. So we can't sit back and wait for reality to change. No, we have to actively start changing things inside of ourselves. And then we will change reality. And then we're going to see what we truly want to see, what we truly want to create here. So that's very important. I'd like to leave it at this and hope to see you in another video. Bye.